morning. So we are here in Jackson, right beneath the Tetons. This is little panoramic view from my parents' backyard. And there you can see the edge of the house where I was sitting and knitting this morning. My parents moved here about a year and a half ago from DC. So we're just here hanging out, and we'll go do some hiking. We're gonna check out, there's an art fair downtown, so we're gonna check that out, hang out. So we will be here the next couple days, and we'll get some knitting done. Thanks to everybody who tuned in last week and the week before that to hear a little bit more about my design process and what I've been working on. I've been traveling lately. We went out to see my folks in Wyoming, and I wanted to share with you a little bit about what I was working on while I was there. So as some of you have seen on Instagram, I finished the body of this sweater that I've been working on. It's a colorway called Russet. A couple of you have asked on Instagram. It's one of my favorites. I think all of Brooke's colors are beautiful, but I really, really love this sort of orangey red for fall. So this is Cormo Sport, so it's lightweight enough that it should be wearable in September and should be, you know, a 3-season plus cold night sweater for most of the year, which I'm super excited about. And this is the first time that I've designed a top-down yoke, so it's been another cool sort of design challenge for me. One of the things about sort of my process is I try to work from, you know, designing as if I were designing a flat pattern for sewing. So I'll draw out the schematic of what I think the pieces need to look like, and then I'll do all the math and figure out, make sure analytically the sweater works. So one of the things that's a little bit of a challenge when you're designing a 3-dimensional garment, and particularly when you're doing shaping like short rows or you're doing yoke shaping, a really fun challenge for me to sort of figure that out. And I'm really happy with how the sweater turned out. So I'm working on the sleeves now, and then we'll get that out for testing probably end of this week. So if you're interested, hit me up in the comments, send me a DM, email, any way to contact me. Carrier pigeon, raven also works, since I'd love to have folks. And this one will be, we're trying to get this out kind of mid-September. Some of you saw I posted on Instagram yesterday about knitting top-down sleeves and what your preferred methods were. You guys had a ton of great feedback about what your preferred method. Surprise, this is actually mine, which is knitting top-down sleeves flat. Erin Templer has a great post on Fringe about this. Basically, you just add a selvage stitch on each side and then you seam it together at the end. For me, it's just faster than small circumference circular knitting. I had knit most of this sleeve and then I changed my mind about a couple of things, and again, worked backwards to make sure I was making changes uniformly everywhere and reknit it. So I'm now about to start the cables on the sleeves, and I'm really excited to get that done today. So I'm a little bit behind where I had hoped to be. I had hoped to come home from Wyoming with a finished sweater, but that's okay. So I wanted to answer about this sweater one sort of common mailbag question I get, which is, you know, can I do this seamed sweater seamlessly? Or why did you choose to do this with seams? And I answer that in part because I've done a couple of seamless sweaters lately, and I've gotten some questions of like, hey, I thought you were on Team Seam. And the answer is that for a lot of the work I do, I am Team Seam all the way. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what's different about this sweater and about Maple Shade, and why I thought those were really good choices for seamless garments. So why do I like seams? One, as I've mentioned a couple times, I just have really bad attention span for really long rows. So I like seamed sweaters for the sole purpose that it makes them portable and smaller to take with you, and you feel like you're finishing a piece faster. Nothing makes you feel like a knitting superhero more than like doing a cardigan front in a day and a half, and then you're like, hey, the sweater's gonna be done in no time, and then you ignore that the back is gonna take much longer. Shh, don't tell. So that's sort of one reason, is like purely how I like to knit. So that's always worked well for me. The other thing is I design a lot of sweaters that have a lot of cabling. Perhaps we've met, I'm into cabled sweaters. So I design a lot of things that have relatively heavy body pieces, particularly if it's Aran weight, really even worsted or DK. If it's got cables on every right side row, it's got some mass to it. And so seams, particularly in the shoulder, help provide some structural rigidity and help ensure that you have a sweater that's not going to fall apart or drag down to your knees. Also depends a lot on fiber blend. So Tangled Up in Gray, which I did for Interweave last fall, is a 50-50 Corriedale alpaca blend. I don't know how many of you have ever made an alpaca sweater, but alpaca has a lot of weight and not a lot of elasticity to it, so it tends to drag. So ensuring that, again, the structurally important parts of that sweater around your shoulders are relatively solid and not going anywhere is going to help that sweater keep its shape. Which, again, if you're going to bother knitting a sweater, you want it to last and you want it to wear the way you want it to throughout its life. So that's part of why I use seams there. Here, this sweater is a sport weight, so it's significantly lighter. Maple shade is also like a heavy sport, light DK, and the detailing is much less. So here we've got cables kind of just for the last 40 rows. On maple shade, you've just got 2 columns of cables. So and maple shade is short sleeved. So in general, you have less mass dragging down the sweater. Here in a yoked sweater, you've distributed the increases all the way around the sweater. So there's no one kind of choke point where there's a lot of mass dragging down somewhere and there's not a seam to back it up. On the other hand, if you're knitting something like Angwin or Howell Mountain, again, where you've got just an enormous mass of cables, I find that the structure of seams is really important there. On the other hand, those sweaters, the most important structural seam is that shoulder seam. Once you've got that in there, I think the side seams help with biasing and also, again, keep you from knitting a row that is 1,000 years long, particularly for Howell Mountain. It's just a lot to knit in one piece, but you could certainly pick up those sleeves and knit them top down. If you're gonna do that, I like Elizabeth Doherty's method for sleeve cap shaping that's in her book Top Down. I think it works really well and gets a really nicely shaped and nice looking sleeve cap. I don't mind seaming sleeve caps, so it doesn't bother me to work that way. But again, if you are super allergic to seaming sleeve caps, but you don't mind seaming in straight lines, doing those sweaters in pieces and then picking up the sleeves and knitting them top down is a totally good option. So that's a little bit about kind of where I come down on seams and seamlessness, particularly with these recent sweaters. Again, I'm happy to answer more questions on that. I have a lot more thoughts about sweater construction, obviously, but those are a couple of kind of top line things. As you think about these sweaters and as you think about the compromise between, you know, what's fast and efficient, what suits your style of knitting, and also what's best for the garment that you're making and its longevity and durability and its design characteristics. That's it for me this week. Again, I'm going to have a testing call up for this sweater, hopefully by the end of the week. And that will be on Instagram and Ravelry, and I'll link to it in the comments. So hit me up in the comments below if you have questions or anything you want me to talk about next week. Thanks again for tuning in. And again, you can find me on Ravelry and Instagram as SK Rosenthal and on the web at sloanerosenthalknits.com. Thanks so much and have a great week and happy knitting.